In every age, there is a cause worth fighting for. But in the future, the greatest threat to our survival will not be man at all.
Hey, kid, what's going on? War! We're going to war!
Now, the youth of tomorrow must travel across the stars to defend our world.
We are a generation commanded by fate to defend humankind.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
We are going in with first wave. You smash the entire area. You kill anything that has more than 2 legs. You get me? We get you, sir!
But they will face an enemy more devastating than any ever imagined.
Here it comes!
Incoming!
Mayday, this is Roughneck 2-0.
We're under attack, sir. We need retrieval now.
Someone made a damn mistake.
The bugs laid a trap for us, didn't they?
TriStar Pictures takes you to the front lines of the next frontier.
Kill them all!
Starship Troopers.
Okay. This is another episode of 90s Night. Finally. And I say that with all kinds of love in my heart for the internet and all kinds of technical problems that we've had. Listen, this is maybe our 4th time trying to record this episode for whatever reason, and we're hoping that this is the last time we have to record it. So we're gonna seem like we're really, really fresh and polished on this episode. But hey, my name is Benner from Black Fawn Distro. I'm your host tonight. Of course, I am Vacation Ape. We'll get to that and what that means in a second. But I'm always, as usual, joined by my esteemed colleague, my co-host, my resident mixologist, Kels McNells, which we've determined is broadcasting from McNell's Manor over in parts unknown. Kels, how you doing tonight? Sorry this has taken so long to get on the docket here, but hey, welcome back. 6-pack challenge. This is our 6th episode. Hey, we did it. Yay.
We did it. Hooray. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we've said yes, we can't wait to record this episode. We've said that actually 3 times and half recorded it. So basically my mic was cutting out, so I would say a bunch of stuff and Kels would nod her head and not want to say that my mic wasn't working, although I could hear everything. But then you would just kind of have this delayed response trying to piece together my disabled, disjointed mic audio, which was coming through. So anyway, how am I sounding right now? Hopefully we've figured it out. There was some technical glitches. We've put our heads together. We're smart people, right? We know this stuff.
We know technology. We'll see in approximately 8 minutes because it seems to last about 10, and then that was when it was starting to crap out before. So we'll see where we're at in 8 minutes.
Right. And if that's the case, then maybe we slim down these episodes to 8 minutes and that's it. So listen, if you're joining us, we broadcast 90s Nights exclusively to the Black Fawn Distro YouTube channel. Like I mentioned off the top, this is our 6th episode, and we started doing these because we wanted to jam and just talk about some 90s flicks because looking back, they're really fun to watch, and we share a lot of the same films that we consider our favorites, and also some other films that maybe neither one of us have seen, but the other person has seen, which we call what? You haven't seen that? And then we watch it together or watch it separately, and we report back and we do one of these shows. So look, if this is your first time visiting our YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the thumbs up to like the video, and as well as the bell notification. That'll send you a notification of our future episodes when they become available. We are trying to do these 90s Nights every couple of weeks. And like I said, Kelly, your Rico's Roughnecks today, but maybe we should have changed names because you should have been Vacation Ape because perhaps because you are going on a bit of a vacation, but hopefully back to do another 90s Night, so we might still be able to stay on schedule. But if we don't, hey, don't hold it against us. Everyone needs some time off. you got to recharge the batteries, right? So
If I
in the
explode on the
meantime,
plane, we'll know why.
yeah, yeah, it's just, why is that lady so tired? Oh, because she had to record a podcast like 500 times before she left. Listen, if you want to go back into and watch some of the other videos, of course, our most recent episode was Tremors. Of course, before that, we did the Frank Marshall directed Arachnophobia, which is a treat. Episode 3, we did Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves. Of course, Troll 2, we did for our second episode, which is a movie I hadn't seen, but Kel's had, and of course, it was a well, you've seen it multiple times, but it blew my mind as well. So I'm so glad we did that. And of course, if you go all the way back to the beginning, we did our inaugural episode on American Psycho, which is a supersized 2-hour episode because we really didn't know what we were doing with the show. We just wanted to get on, hit record, and determine, hey, let's just talk about the film for a couple hours.
Yeah, we had
So
a lot to say about that one. Yeah.
we had a lot to say about American Psycho. It's a fantastic film, and we really, really dissected that one, going into the directing and that sort of stuff. So if you'd like to check that out, if you're a fan of the film, and you want to hear what we had to say about it, go back onto our YouTube and check it out. And then, of course, before you head out the door, leave us a comment below, leave us a comment in the section. And we read them all. We try and respond to all of them. And if you have a suggestion for a future 90s night, please let us know, and we will do our best to try and maybe get to them. The only criteria is this: it had to be released in the 90s, and also it has to be some type of horror-based film. Which, hey, why are we doing Starship Troopers tonight? Well, we had so much fun watching Arachnophobia, had so much fun revisiting Tremors. We figured, hey, why don't we do Starship Troopers and sort of do kind of like a trilogy of creature features to kind of end this first sort of chunk of episodes that we've done. So here we are, and we're doing Starship Troopers, which we've got a lot to say about. Now, if you haven't seen the film, we are going to say there's going to be heavy spoilers on this. We're going to dive into the plot, the characters, all kinds of stuff. So if you want to stop watching because you don't want Starship Troopers ruined for you, now's the time. But we're just assuming that you're here to watch us dive into the film and figure out and obviously add to the conversation if you'd like in the comments below. Now, Kels, you are on your 6th mixed drink, not tonight, but just in general, although maybe pretty close since we've had to record this thing 500 times now. But hey, what do you got on the menu over there tonight?
Yeah, so tonight I have the now almost half finished Buenos Aires bug bite.
I was like, do you want to transition glasses to like maybe like a shot glass? Yeah.
Just like keep drinking this one. So this is the Buenos Aires bug bite, which contains melon liqueur, white rum, pina colada, so like a pineapple coconut water mixy thing, and the rest is just water because those seemed like a combination of things that represent Buenos Aires ? The combination of flavors of something somewhat tropical and also a bunch of water. So this is, again, my 6th drink at this point. I really should add the rest of them to our social media at some point, but that means I'll have to go back and rewatch the episodes and remember what I made because I have no idea what I did in the past. They just kind of come to me based on what is in my liquor cabinet and in my fridge at the time. So that is where this one came from. Some of them may be very similar.
And the expectation is that you do that on your vacation too. I don't know if you. Yeah.
That is the plan. That is the plan. So
if you just left the podcast right now, like if you just left the studio, I wouldn't hold it against you. But no. So we're thinking about putting these on our social media because we thought it'd be pretty fun. So I think we're gonna try, like, going forward. I think we're gonna aim to try and maybe put it on the day before. Yeah. So if you do want to kind of make it at home, or if you have a bar at home and you want to kind of just follow along, all the drinks are good. Of course, I'm not as sophisticated, although not usually, but but I'm definitely not as organized as Kels. But I am a little bit sophisticated tonight with my fancy civilian. No, what is it? Am I civilian tonight? No, I'm civilian tonight, not citizen. So civilian,
very easily mixed up.
My top shelf, we'll just say it's white wine, or maybe it's cider, who knows, but
in a very fancy glass.
Delicious. And listen, let's get into this because we don't really want to do it again. And as usual, there's lots of synopses out there. Let's look at the one
Yes.
for Starship Troopers. I, of course, picked this up on physical media, 4K. Any chance I get to grab a 4K disc, I try to get it. Synopses on IMDb, online, Rotten Tomatoes, whatever. But usually they're the best on any sort of physical
It's
media.
official.
It's official. So anyway, let's get on this and let's see how this goes. All right. So from the bridge of the fleet battle station Ticonderoga, with its sweeping galactic views to the desolate terrain of the planet Clandathu, teeming with shrieking, fire-spitting, brain-sucking creatures, acclaimed director Paul Verhoeven crafts a dazzling epic based on Robert A. Heinlein's classic sci-fi adventure. Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyer, Denise Richards, Jake Busey, Neil Patrick Harris, NPH, Patrick Muldoon, and Michael Ironside star as courageous soldiers who travel to the distant and desolate Clandathu system for the ultimate showdown between the species. Now, I thought that was pretty good. A pretty good reading. Kind of a couple of tongue twisters in there. Also, Clandathu being there twice is a bit of a mouthful. But
someone slaved over that synopsis is my favorite part with having the DVD synopsis or the Blu-ray or the 4K synopsis. Someone spent time on that. That is, again, it's official. It's primo.
It's like everything about this movie I have a hard time pronouncing, and I don't know why. I'm usually pretty good. I think I'm just
so
excited.
Futuristic. Yeah.
It's like the pronunciations are so futuristic that's the issue.
Our 2023 minds can't handle it. We just can't get there.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, now everything's a joke because we've done this like 674 times. So, listen, Kels, give the audience a quick rundown of the production and initial release of the film.
Absolutely. So this was released by TriStar Pictures. It was theatrically released on November 7th, 1997. So, of course, went into production in 1996, which makes it a very deeply 90s movie and thus an excellent qualifier for 90s Night. It was directed by the aforementioned Paul Verhoeven, who is also known for Showgirls, Basic Instinct, Hollow Man, Total Recall, and RoboCop. So he's had a very varied and diverse roster of films. Good for him. It was written by Edward Neumeier, based on the book by Robert A. Heinlein, and was starring, as previously mentioned, Casper Van Dien, Denise Richards, Dina Meyer, Jake Busey, Neil Patrick Harris, my man Clancy Brown, Patrick Muldoon, Michael Ironside, and someone I did not recognize at all until I saw their name on the cast list, Rue McClanahan. So that is excitement.
And we're going to tell you who Rue McClanahan is if you don't know, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Don't look it up. It'll be a surprise.
She's a golden girl if you don't know that. So you should know that.
We got to start. We got to start from the beginning now.
I thought you meant like who her character is.
Oh, no. I meant like that's who that you'll know who she is because you'll be like, I don't know who that is, but I know who she is. And then you look it up and you're like, oh, it's Rue McClanahan it's Blanche from the Golden Girls.
Blanche from the Golden
awesome.
Girls. Yeah. But we don't know who her character is yet because, again, I did not recognize her at all until I saw the cast list.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously the film is a nice compact 2 hours and 9 minutes, just kind of falling over that 2 hour mark. Of course, we're keeping an eye on that because as we go back and watch these 90s movies, we're kind of comparing them to movies that are released in the present day and seeing if these present day films actually earn their 2.5 hour, 2 hour and 45 minute, or 3.5 hour runtime. In most cases, we're finding it's not, and we find a lot of these movies in the 90s actually have better pacing and never really outstay their welcome. So something we're keeping an eye on. Domestic box office for Starship Troopers was $54.8 million, and international box office, which was starting to become a thing in the late 90s, was $66.4 million for a total box office of $121.2 million. Of course, that was based on a budget of $110 million, and of course, all figures are estimated in US dollars. Currently, it's 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is pretty fair, with 78 reviews and a critical consensus of that reads a fun movie if you can accept the excessive gore and wooden acting. Two things that are very near and dear to my heart as well as to yours, I think. Right, Kels?
Yes. I feel like they're also kind of staples of 90s Night in general.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of the marketing of the film and as well in theaters and home video, what do you have for taglines and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so there was quite a few taglines for this film. So I'm going to start with the good, which is since the dawn of his existence, humankind has ruled the earth, but now the rules are about to change. There's a new kind of enemy, a new kind of war. Mankind just became an endangered species, and the one that I'm not 100% sure if this is real or not. The source for this is IMDb. If it's real, I do not know how it got past multiple people in marketing. But genocide doesn't compare to this, is
Which
the
is
other
crazy.
tagline.
Like, that's a crazy tag. Like now, look, we couldn't find it on a poster. We did try and check.
I feel like
But
that would
it's
be
in
one
multiple
sketchy poster.
places. Like, it's in multiple places online,
Yes.
that list it as an official tagline from Starship Troopers. So if anyone knows where we can find that, please let us know, because obviously with the satirical nature of the film, of course, this is a fairly, it's a misunderstood satire, but it is a very on the nose satire too, if you go in knowing what you're looking for. But obviously a lot of references to, to the Third Reich and Germany and during World War II. And I don't know what words we can and cannot say to not get demonetized, but whatever, you know what I'm talking about. So to have that as a tagline, genocide doesn't compare to this. Holy crap.
Risky.
The 90s, everyone, the 90s.
They didn't care.
Do you feel like, just not to digress too much, but do you
Yeah.
feel like as we get older, or as maybe we meet more younger people, like the 90s is kind of has more in common with the 80s than it does with like the decades that followed it? Because that's kind of how I'm feeling right about now.
Yeah, I feel like with the 90s, and like I could talk about this for like hours, but I feel like one of the things of the 90s that's so magical is that it was also kind of a time that was the internet was still very new and like very, very basic, to the point that like we were excited about new technology, but we didn't understand or weren't really even confronted yet with like what that could possibly mean, and like the interconnectivity of like everybody being able to respond to everything that goes on out there. So I think it was a much simpler time where we didn't realize that like if you say something, it's going to stick with you for a long time, and people are going to
Forever.
find it forever, and they're going to hold it against you.
That's why we decided, you know what we should do? We should do a podcast where we put it on YouTube and it can live there forever. So when I'm like
Forever.
80 years old in like 5 years, I can go back and watch myself as a young 75-year-old man.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like it was also a simpler time because it was like pre 9/11, and so everything was like very like idealistic, and like technology was fun, and there was no real problems in the world. And I mean that kind of ties into that. We'll discuss all that
Yeah,
kerfuffle with how this
100%.
movie kind of circles back to that. But yeah.
So, as I mentioned off the top, I checked this movie out in 4K because I'm a big 4K nut now.
4K fan.
I love 4K. I think now this film I didn't think looked amazing in 4K. I thought it revealed a little bit too much of the special effects, but that's beside the point. Still looks really, really good. How did you check out the film? Because we always have dueling formats when we review something for 90s Night.
I checked it out. I think it was on Netflix. So yeah, that's how I watched it.
Okay, and
This
of course we'll put the links
streaming
down.
service.
Yeah, we'll put the links down below as to where you can check it out,
Mhm.
and where you can purchase a copy of Starship Troopers on
Yeah.
4K or Blu-ray if that's your jam, or DVD, or I guess VHS. But
Yeah.
I don't remember, like, this is one of the few movies that I don't remember seeing in the theater, but I do remember
Mm.
watching when it first came out. So I have a feeling I watched it like, I wouldn't have, yeah, in 97. Like, I still have a feeling I would have watched it, at home, on VHS, or on, I don't think it was DVD. I think it was just VHS at the time. So that's the only recollection I have of watching the film. Like, do you have any, do you remember watching it for the first time, or is it just kind of like we talked about this with Tremors, where we're like, I don't
Mhm.
remember what, I was always remember having seen it, but never having watched it, right?
Yeah, I remember, like, seeing the poster for this, like, the movie art. Like, I don't remember if I saw it at a video store, if, like, we had it, I don't remember, but I remember, like, looking at the poster art for this movie a lot and being really intrigued by it. My folks are kind of, like, not really big into horror, but, like, do dig some sci-fi, so I think that's another reason why this movie was kind of shown to me as a 10-year-old, or around 10 years old when this came out. Um because it's a sci-fi movie, and it's it's accessible because the enemy is just giant bugs, and that's really accessible because even though they're scary, they don't have feelings probably, so it's okay to kill them according to this movie. Again, more on that later. But this, like you said, it's one of those movies that I don't remember the first time I saw it. I don't remember how old I was. I don't remember when or where it was. I just feel like it's kind of like one of those things that you just always, it's always been there in the back of your brain, and it just kind of existed. I don't know a time before Starship Troopers, only a time with Starship Troopers.
It's kind of like it's a little bit like Dark City, right? So like when they say, if you have anyone out there seen that movie where they say, I know you've been to the beach, but can you actually remember how you got there? And nobody knows that, right? So
That's good.
so I feel like that's, yeah, maybe that's a
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I don't know. Dark City, that's a 90s movie too.
Yeah.
Maybe we look at that one, but it's
Oh.
more sci-fi. It's not really horror, although does have some horror components to it, but I don't know. I feel like if we review that, we're gonna get some messages from people saying that I don't think that's horror enough for you guys. So, but
I feel
hey,
like I am going to say something that's going to cause you to have a large reaction.
okay.
I
It's
have
the
not seen
audio.
Dark City.
You've never seen Dark City? What? Okay, I thought you were gonna say my mic was fucked again.
No. Something much less dramatic. Yeah, I've never seen Dark City. I don't
Something
think I
more
have.
dramatic, I might
I
say.
know. That's true. That's true.
You've never
I
okay.
don't think I've seen
Oh.
that. Okay, we'll have to watch that. It'll have to make its way into a
Okay, so
90s
listen,
night.
here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna, because we've talked about this. We just got back from Fan Expo, had a great time over the
Yeah.
weekend, and
Mhm.
we talked about this kind of when we were in the booth for Black Fawn Distro, slinging discs and talking to people, and we were chatting, and we think we're gonna put a lot more polls on Instagram, just saying, hey, listen, we're thinking about this movie, and this movie.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's gonna be too hard to kind of like be like, hey, what should we review next? Because I think
Too
too many
open-end is
people,
going to be,
too
yeah.
open ended. We'll get like 500 responses and whatever, and so I think what we'll do is we'll maybe pick like 2 or 3 films, we'll put it to a vote, and then wherever the vote lands on Instagram, that's the movie we'll do for the next 90s night, or at least an upcoming 90s night. So maybe we'll throw Dark City into the mix. It's a fantastic, I would actually be pumped for you to watch that regardless, because I would just be interested in knowing what you would think. It's super gothic.
Mm.
It's a cool flick. But anyway, listen, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Starship Troopers.
Yes.
Now, I love this flick
Mhm.
because this movie is so batshit crazy. It's a total cross between like RoboCop and Total Recall.
Mhm.
And of course, Paul Verhoeven directing all 3 of these movies. This is kind of like his trilogy of sci-fi films that he made in like the 80s and 90s. So I'd never really thought about that until someone had mentioned it when I was doing my research for the film. And I think it's a pretty. I think it shares a lot of similarities to RoboCop 1. I don't think it's quite as good, but I think RoboCop is almost like a perfect film. So, but this movie does share that real biting satirical commentary, both on like uh, economic and social norms, and all that stuff that was kind of going on in the 80s. At least that's why I've always thought RoboCop was very, very good at sort of like underlining that. And I think this movie does a really, really great job of doing that for sort of like the military industrial complex.
Mhm.
Obviously the 90s, America was just coming out of the Gulf War and the war in Kuwait. So it's a really interesting film to revisit. And of course, it's a movie that wasn't really received well when it first came out, and since has been revisited numerous times by a lot of critics and a lot of audiences to really kind of appreciate what Verhoeven and the crew were trying to do with this flick. So your thoughts, like and then like let's really dive into the plot and the characters, and yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so first in the comment about RoboCop being very similar to this, also written by Edward Neumeier. So fun fact about that. So it's very, very similar kind of in tone. So yeah, I like I kind of mentioned before with this film, I think it's kind of the perfect film to comfortably address xenophobia in a way, because like it's the perfect enemy that like it preys on our fears of giant bugs and gives a no guilt enemy, because like if you have most films, if they have any kind of humanoid villain, there's that part of you that like feels like, oh, maybe they're misunderstood, maybe this is, but like bugs, nobody feels that way about bugs. Everyone just wants to, just kill them all and have it be very big and gory and gruesome, and they're very, very vicious, very, very violent. And so I think it kind of allows the audience to not feel bad about it, although kind of when you take a step back and look at it, it is a little bit more complicated than that, of course. But there's, there's themes of like talking about civic virtue and the citizens versus the civilians, and kind of what it means to have that civic virtue, what it means to kind of participate. The reason that a lot of the soldiers, the young soldiers, are there is not just because they wanted to join the military in some cases, but because they just wanted to have the opportunity to do normal things that we kind of take for granted now. I know that when we first recorded this, we kind of talked a little bit about one particular scene that I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later, where they kind of go around the room essentially and they all explain the reasons why they're there. And for some of them, it's because they want to be a politician. They want to have kids. So they want to get a license to have babies. They want to, it's just all these very basic things that they have to enlist in order to get the opportunity to do those things. So all in all, I mean, it's a fascinating movie because it is that excellent type of biting satire uh, about like the industrial military complex and kind of how that works as a whole. But also it does have kind of a specific look at like oligarchy by ex-military citizenry government, as well as having kind of some direct references or reflections is the word I'm looking for, reflections later on sort of how it has this almost premonitionary sight lines of how we kind of approach certain battles that happen maybe a little bit later on, and having that Nazi symbolism oh my gosh, I always stumble over the word totalitarian regimes. And of course, again, how it has those kind of echoes with the war on terror in Afghanistan later on that wasn't really first intended, but kind of works really well after the fact.
I totally agree.
Mhm.
And I think this film is like it's one of those films that was made just in this pocket of time where it could
Yeah.
have been made. I don't think you can make this movie after 9/11. Not this type of movie. I'm not talking about the social commentary or commentary on maybe like war and military and that sort of stuff. I'm just talking about the type of movie. Like this movie is crazy. Like
Mhm.
it's this over the top cartoonish comic book movie with this sort of biting satire. And of course, the underlying theme is whether or not if a totalitarian state had did control like a global like a global government. So
Yeah.
what if Nazi Germany had won World War II? Is this what the world would look like 50 years after that, or some other? That doesn't necessarily need to be the Third Reich taking over, although there's a lot of there's a lot of symbolism in the film,
Even
um
visually, yeah.
visually, with the uniforms and the logos of the military, just how just the indoctrination of like the youthful characters into sort of
Mhm.
this more sort of structure of authority that's sort of built up over time within the plot. But speaking of the plot, like I mean, I think like this movie kind of sets up a lot of funny stuff in the first part of it, the first act.
Mhm.
The movie really gets going in the second act, and
Yeah.
like but again, it's like the trailer's awesome. We watched it off the top. We'll play it again at the end. Great score. I always mess up his name, so I'm just gonna call him Basil. But Basil, the composer, like the score in this movie is awesome. That trailer looks amazing, and the second part of the second act of the movie doesn't really let up. Like it's really
Mhm.
solid as far as seeing these characters sort of like go through their introductions and then through boot camp, and now they're in the war and they're in the shit, so to speak. So but I do feel like there's a great character arc for Rico. So
Yeah.
obviously Casper Van Dien playing Rico for Rico's Roughnecks. And it does kind of give him like you are along for the ride with him, and there's definitely some differing uh, there's some different opinions on the other characters, but I think we're in agreement that yes, the movie still feels somewhat futuristic and it is
Mhm.
still ahead of its time. We'll get into a couple of things regarding that as well. But I gotta say, like Dina Meyer as Dizzy is
Oh,
probably the true MVP of the flick. Um,
absolutely.
at the time, I don't think she got enough credit. I think a lot of the marketing was built around Denise Richards, and even in the plot, and like what's so crazy about this movie is that, or the structure of it is that the movie is between the three friends, which is Neil Patrick Harris and Casper Van Dien and Denise Richards. But Dina Meyer is sort of on the outside of that, and there's this love triangle set up between Carmen and Dizzy and Rico, but she's always there. She actually plays a very, very significant role in both Rico's development as well as driving the plot forward. She's amazing. She's a very, very talented actress, and I don't know, like, she's awesome. And
Yeah.
we talked about this with Tremors, where we're like, when I was a kid, like looking at this movie through I guess, how old was I? I don't want to date. Well, I'm going to date myself anyway. I think 15-year-old lens, I think, is when I watched this film. Looking at that, but nowadays, now going back and watching, I go, wow, I actually really like Dizzy a lot more, because she's just cooler. She's more badass. She's got a bit more of a just a bit more gumption in her, and it's just she's just a very, very cool character.
Yeah.
We should mention the other characters as well in the film, because we rattled off a whole laundry list of actors and actresses that are in this movie. Let's talk about there's some other people that pop up, of course. Michael Ironside, who was in the other two Verhoeven sci-fi pictures, both in Total Recall and RoboCop. Obviously, he's awesome in this flick. And then, of course, we've got Clancy Brown as the grizzled boot camp instructor. I love Clancy Brown, and he's great here as well. A couple other significant mentions. You mentioned, of course, Rue McClanahan as who is Blanche from the Golden Girls. She is the teacher. She seems to be blind, like she's got the glasses on,
Scars.
the scars. So it's inferred that maybe she saw combat and had her eyes sort of taken from her from maybe one of the bugs. But she does teach. She teaches the dissection class of the bug dissection class, where we kind of meet Dizzy and Carmen and Rico. Carmen's friend at the academy, her flight partner, is a young Amy Smart, which is pretty cool because I'd never noticed that before. And the guy who is at the court martial, he's sort of like the main officer at the boot camp, is actually Dean Norris, who is a pretty good character actor, but you would know him recently as Hank from Breaking Bad. So really cool to see him. And that's why I like watching these 90s movies, because like you go back and you see all these characters that are like, oh man, like that's so and so. Like I love that, because it's interesting to see how much work some of these men and women have put in over time to sort of finally land that sort of iconic role, the role that they're always known for. But in reality, they've done all of this work in all of these feature films before that. So always a treat to see those kind of actors in these smaller roles in movies like this.
Yeah, I think for Casper Van Dien, this was the film that kind of gave him that big role as well, that he still recognizes Rico. He still does like little cameo bits and pieces and like comedy sketches as Rico, which I think is great. He has such a deep love for this character. And kind of what you were saying earlier about how this movie really was kind of the perfect product of its time. I don't feel like it could have been made quite the same if it was done today. I think part of the reason for that is because apparently management at Sony, which is one of the production studios, kept changing all the time. So when Paul Verhoeven and Edward Neumeier were sort of making the film, it wasn't really getting a lot of eyeballs on it until like they had basically compiled a rough cut of the movie. And then that's when the studio executives finally saw the footage. So at that point, it was kind of too late for them to have any kind of interference and to do anything, to say anything. So they're able to kind of get away with a lot, I think, which works out well in favor of this movie. And I think also with the 90s, as we were kind of touching on earlier, it does have that very kind of bombastic, brash energy to it. Each act of the film, or each kind of chunk of the film, is sort of goes down this darker and darker path. It starts off very young and idealistic when they're at school. It starts off very bright. Then they kind of go to the academy and they're learning and they're training, and it's still very like, hoorah, this is exciting. We're going to have so much fun. And then, of course, there's that first battle scene on Clendathu, the invasion, where it really just kind of shit hits the fan and it goes off from there. Gets darker and darker and darker progressively until there's someone getting their brain sucked out by a giant bug. So really, it goes on a pretty adventurous journey. But I know we were talking the first time we recorded this as well about Dizzy as the characters, just kind of jumping back to the
let's talk Dizzy, because I know she's like go
she's
for
amazing.
sure.
So I loved when I was younger, they had an animated series of this show, or of this animated series of this movie, I should say, which was kind of done in that like 90s, sort of late 90s, early 2000s style of animation, computer animation. But I loved that Dizzy was such a big character in the animated series because I think she was recognized as the fan favorite in the film because she's so great and she's got such spunk and such energy and such charisma and uniqueness, nerve, and attitude as well. She would be a RuPaul favorite, I think. But she's got such an energy to her that you really can't help but fall in love with her. And I think that's a great way to kind of bring her in as this side love interest because the entire time, Rico's pining after Denise Richards' character, Carmen. Is that her name? Carmen?
Carmen, yeah.
Yeah, he's pining after Carmen. And the whole time, everyone in the audience is going like, Rico, man, she's not right for you. Dizzy's right there. You just got to go for Dizzy, man. And then so they finally have that connection. It's just that much more impactful. And then, of course, as we mentioned before, spoilers, her death is that much more impactful as well because I kind of feel like they did her dirty by having her go out at all because she's such a great character, and it kind of adds into like the girl in the refrigerator trope that you see a lot in comic books as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that it's also kind of like it's a cool death, even though I feel like it's very brief. Like it seems like it all happens so fast, but I feel like that's also very true to how it would really unfold. Like there wouldn't be a big dramatic. I mean, there wouldn't be a big dramatic slow motion element to it, but there wouldn't be that big dramatic like, oh no, everything's happening and this is also it would be as fast as turning around and getting impaled in a couple different spots by bug chompers.
So yeah, and speaking of which, Dina Meyer was originally supposed to read for the role of Carmen.
Yeah.
And when she got the script, when she read it, she went in and said, "I really want to read for Dizzy. I thought Dizzy was more interesting, more of an interesting character as far as what she brought to the role, and she wanted to kind of dig in on that as opposed to Carmen." So they agreed. One of the reasons for that was because she tested really, really well on screen with Casper Van Dien, and
Mhm.
it was one of the reasons he got the role. He got called back, I think, 4 or 5 times before he landed the role of Rico, and a deciding factor in that was the chemistry that he had on screen with Dina Meyer. Now, I should say this too: it's like when I was watching the 4K, I went back and watched some of the commentary, so I didn't watch all of it, but the commentary is very the commentary is Paul Verhoeven, Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyer, and Neil Patrick Harris. It's a very, very flirty commentary. Like it's like I mean, there's a lot of beautiful people in this film. Of course, that was one of the criticisms that got levied against it when it came out. But
Melrose Place in space.
yeah, but that was always intentional. Like they wanted to do it with sort of unknown actors and actresses to give it that sense of like this sort of like youthful vigor, and they didn't want anyone too recognizable in the film. Yeah, I mean, I think like for Dizzy, so what happened with the film was that when they tested it for test audiences, people hated Carmen. They didn't like her. She didn't test well. People thought that she was, and this is funny because, and this is something that in the commentary they kind of mention is that Verhoeven talks about how like, well, she's just enacting her own agency. Like Carmen's making her own decisions. She doesn't want to be with Rico. They put in the scene where she sends Rico the video disc saying, "Hey, we're just too far away. We can't be with one another. We got to split up." But that didn't matter. Like people were just like they hated Carmen, and Verhoeven said that some of the comments he got back on the test audience screenings were just absolutely awful. But they needed the movie to work because everyone loved Dizzy more, and they
Mhm.
thought that like Carmen was sort of like deceitful and like untrustworthy and all this stuff. Right now, I don't really think that tracks. And Verhoeven himself was like, I didn't really understand how they got that from that, but it was just what the test audiences went through. Just for the record, I'd love to be in a test audience because I think I give really good feedback. But anyway, it's interesting too because her role is really cut down. Like so, Denise Richards' role was cut down. She didn't really complain too much because it was her first major big blockbuster. I think it was her first major film. before she went on to do other stuff like, Valentine and Wild Things, of course. But so she just kind of said, well, whatever. But there are some scenes that are cut down, and in the end, there's a scene at the very end of the movie where there's a cut scene where Casper Van Dien and Denise Richards, where they kiss at the end because they're back together. And so this girl that he's been chasing since the start of the movie, they actually end up together. But she tested so horribly, like or I shouldn't say Denise Richards tested horribly. The character tested horribly. The plot tested horribly. It just wasn't what the audience wanted. They wanted something different. So they just remained kind of friends at the end and not romantically involved. So interesting that they went that way. But there is some funny scenes. Essentially, the plot is based on the fact that like Carmen's family is are citizens. They've served, and Rico's family are obviously civilians, and so it's sort of that class struggle between the two families, which is why she doesn't want to link up with him, because like her father doesn't approve and all this stuff. So all that stuff's cut from the film. You never really get a sense of that, but it is interesting how that's sort of translated, because. And Verhoeven actually does mention this looking back. Obviously, the commentary was made obviously after the movie was released, but and he says like if it was a man, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but for some reason, because it was a woman, it like he was fairly offended by it, because he said it shouldn't have mattered, but that's they had to get the script, or they had to get the movie and the cut down to something that they could market, and of course you use your test audiences to do that. So. Yeah, very interesting development.
I feel like if test audiences today like wouldn't have that same reaction. I don't know if that was a very 90s way to approach relationships in movies, but like again, Carmen having her own agency and making that decision to sort of say like, hey, you know what, I have these ambitions and goals, and I really want to move ahead with what I'm doing, and I know you're really enjoying what you're doing, and I think it's just best if we see other spaceships, essentially. I think I feel like that would sort of go over so much better with
Someone
audiences
please
today.
use that in the future. I think we need to see other spaceships.
We do see other spaceships. So I feel like that would go over much better with audiences today, because I feel like audiences are a lot more appreciative, or like that we look for that sort of thing more. Like we want the female characters to have that agency and to like put herself first, and not just be like arm candy that like, oh, he joined the army because of you, and so you should just be with him because he wants you to be with him. Like that's not a good enough reason for you to stay in a relationship, because somebody wants to be with you if you don't want to be with them anymore. So I don't know. I feel like that seems like a very 90s thing, a very 90s way to approach those sort of love stories. I'd be really curious if this movie had not already existed, how it would have tested today.
There's a scene. I didn't talk about this in the original cut of this review, but I'm gonna mention it now because I did think it was pretty funny. Is that so there's a scene at the start of the movie where like Casper Van Dien's trying to get with Carmen, right? So Rico's trying to get with Carmen, and they're sitting on this like grassy knoll that's in front of this giant like pyramid thing. Like it looks like the pyramid from Vegas, right? Like that hotel in Vegas. And they're sitting on this grassy knoll, and he's like, come on, why don't you just let me come over tonight and like, whatever. And he's like, oh, my dad won't approve and all that stuff. But as they're having this conversation, he like unzips her like her top, and like reaches his hand inside and grabs her boob, like that's the cut scene. And I was just like, wait a second, what? Like, I mean, because I'd never seen it before until I watched the Blu-ray or the 4K, sorry. So, and I was like, I wonder, I think that's Paul Verhoeven just being like, no, like that's not a big deal. Like, this is how we're going to frame the characters in this kind of like alternate, like this futuristic setting where it's like, this is no problem. But it was such a weird, like off. I was like, you'd never see that in a movie now. Like you'd never see that, not in a major studio, tentpole flick. But the other thing too, as well, is that like you just mentioned how you probably wouldn't frame relationships like that in like, let's say, modern movies. But also, I think the 90s gets away with creating scenes that I don't think you would see in modern movies that actually add to the character. And that one scene in particular is when Dizzy transfers to Rico's unit in boot camp. And basically Clancy Brown just kind of scoffs at her, and she like just, it's the baddest, it's one of the most badass scenes in the movie, is she takes off her jacket and she's like, let's go. And she knows she's going to get the shit beat out of her. Like she knows, like she just needs to prove herself that she can hang in this division. Right. So,
Hang with the roughnecks.
with the roughnecks. And then she's got the next, like Clancy Brown chokes her out. Like she gets in a couple licks, but he chokes her out. And the next scene, she's got this giant bruise on her neck. And I was like, you would never see that in a movie today. But again, it's like it creates her as fearless. It creates her as more of an equal to Rico, which is something the movie is really tries to get to push across, is that there is this sense of like futuristic equality that exists in this sort of like totalitarian system, whether or not you agree with that or not. And that it's interesting how that is one of the things on how they did it, where like the troops, like you mentioned, like this sort of like faceless, nameless entity, which is an enemy, that they can just join forces together and just blow the shit out of. Right. So I don't know. It's interesting to me. I mean, I think, again, I think there was a lot of camaraderie between the cast, which I think works. And I think you got that from, I think that the other thing too is like Patrick Muldoon wasn't supposed to get cast in this movie, but Denise Richards knew him from something. So she was like, well, what about this guy? So that's how he ended up in the flick, which is obviously Carmen's love interest throughout the film. But I gotta say, listen, on a less serious note, this movie has to get the award for like best looking hair after a helmet's taken off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of relationships, I was just thinking about this is, if you boiled the plot, just kind of bare bones, very like broad strokes, and you explained it to someone, you could pass it off as a Shakespeare play, I think, like just in terms of like how the relationships unfold and how there's this like young couple, and they're from two different worlds, two sides of the tracks, and she goes off to join the
Wrong side
military,
of the
and he goes
galaxy,
after her. Wrong side of the galaxy. He goes after her, and then like he falls in love with somebody else, and it could play out like a Shakespeare play, just the way that all those kind of love triangles unfold and everything. It's kind of funny that way. And of course, like she dies this tragic death, and he's mourning her, but then he goes back to it. Yeah, it's a whole big.
It's all Diz. It's all Diz.
It's all
like,
Diz.
Like Diz is like she's like the glue that holds this flick together, right? Because without her, like she's the challenge. She's the challenge for Rico.
Yeah.
Right. And like physically, like emotionally, intellectually, like she's like, again, like going back to talking about like equality between the sexes in this film, like in the football sequence, right? Like she's the quarterback and Rico's the receiver. And typically that would be reversed, right? Like, and I do still feel the film is, like we talked about this a little bit earlier, is a little ahead of its time, or way ahead of its time when it was made. I think it kind of gets some things right. And I think that's like, as much as it's comical in certain areas, obviously they were stretching to make it seem like here's how this world works. Like the grassy knoll scene, the deleted scene, which I think is pretty funny, but like, but I do still feel like they were kind of, maybe the reach exceeds the grasp here, but I still feel you get credit for making the effort to create something that's like really out of the ordinary. And in 97, like nothing really was coming out like this. And there hasn't really been a film like it since, right?
Yeah. And I think that with the shower scene in particular, it kind of presents the possibility of like futuristic gender neutrality in a kind of like professional way as well. Like it's not a sexualized scene when they're all in the shower together having that conversation. It's a getting to know you scene. It's a learning a little bit more about the characters. It's not like a slow like um slumber party massacre like opening scene. Like it's not that type of shower scene. It's just sort of like they're there and they just happen to be showering having this conversation. And I know that one of the little trivia bits of this film is that Verhoeven and the cinematographer Josef Akano, when they were going to film the scene, the actors were kind of like humming and hawing about it, not sure they were really 100% comfortable with it. And so there was a kind of joking around of Meyer, who said, if it's no big deal, then why don't you do it, to Paul Verhoeven? And so they're like, okay. And him and the cinematographer just stripped down nude and did the whole scene naked in the shower with them. And that's just kind of the
because
chill
Verhoeven's
atmosphere
from
on set.
because Verhoeven's Dutch, right?
Yeah,
So
and then the
his thing was like,
cinematographer came from, like, a nudity camp, like, he was raised in a
yeah.
nudity camp.
So
Yeah,
Verhoeven was just like, well, you Americans are you're so like
uptight.
you're so uptight about nudity, which is totally
Yeah,
true.
absolutely.
And especially from a cultural point of view, like when you compare like the classic, like very European, like quote unquote, very European, right?
European, yeah,
Is like they don't like nudity and sex aren't necessarily a big thing. Like it's nothing
right,
to be, it's not frowned upon or anything like that. Whereas the
right.
States is completely different. Like it's like
Very Puritan.
sex and nudity is the issue, whereas like let's say guns and violence like aren't. And it's very,
Yeah,
very like it's very flipped.
that's true.
And some
Yeah,
of the stuff in this movie, like obviously the nudity and like you mentioned that story. Yeah, and then sorry, just to tack onto that, like Verhoeven, that story got picked up in the press,
mhm.
which he said was not good for the film because people thought that it was something completely different. But really, it was
Yeah,
just Dina Meyer just being like, who I love because she's just like, okay, well, shit, well,
well,
you do it then, right? Like, what do
yeah,
you and him do? It was a dare, right? That's what it was. And again, like it's funny too because even back then, maybe getting press on something like that for all the wrong reasons. But like I mentioned, like you listen to the commentary and all these people are still in the commentary together and like joking around and having that kind of camaraderie, I think kind of reveals sort of like how much fun they did have on the set and how much it kind of like maybe influenced them throughout their career, which is kind of cool
yeah,
to see, right? So
yeah.
um I would say okay, so we're kind of running out of time here, but that's okay because I think we're really done. This is our number 6 episode. So again, if you're first time to the program, please subscribe to the channel, to our YouTube channel, hit the thumbs up icon, and of course ring the bell as well to get notification for future episodes. But we'll try and wrap it up fairly quickly, and then Kelly can go on her vacation. But let's talk favorite scenes, favorite quotes.
Yes. So for me, like the whole Klendathu invasion and the attack on Outpost 29 are two of my favorites. I feel like I think it's Outpost 29 where all the bugs are kind of stacking up against each other against the wall. I feel like that's where World War Z got its idea for like the zombie pile is like from
Mm.
this section of that movie where they're all just like clambering on top of each other and using that as a bug ladder to get over the walls and attack. So those two scenes certainly are standouts for me in terms of favorites, just because they're big and they're brutal and they're bloody and it's really violent and lots of bug deaths and lots of people deaths in really dramatic and gory ways, which fun. So some of my favorite quotes. One would be, "Come on, you apes, you want to live forever." The only good bug is a dead bug. Everyone fights, no one quits. And I need a corporal. You're it until you're dead or I find someone better, which is a great attitude to have.
Okay, yeah, perfect. My favorite quotes are Rico to Xander when he says, "Don't get any ideas about my girlfriend." I like when Rico's dad has a couple quotes in here that I like, where he says, "I'd rather take 10 lashes in the public square than see you ruin your life," which is such a like it's such a play on the trope of in the 80s of like,
Hmm.
you're gonna ruin your life and whatever, and like 10 lashes, which is obviously foreshadowing for when Rico gets his lashes at
Yes.
boot camp
In the public
for
square.
yeah, in the public square pretty much. So another one from Rico's dad, he's like, "You're not going back, you're going on vacation." It's just I think it's just a funny line. And then Michael Ironside, I'd never noticed this before, but his dialogue that says when they first win the first battle, and he said, "I expect the best and I give the best. Here's the beer and here's the entertainment," which I think needs to go on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I also had "Come on, you apes, you want to live forever," which is obviously echoed by Rico in later on in the movie, and also near the end where Rico says, another character says, "How do you know?" And Rico says, "I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how I know, but I know," which I love to. So, I liked my favorite scenes. I mean, I like the little things that this movie does, right? So I like how like the ship, like the captain of the ship gets cut in half by the door at the end. Like I feel like something that is always teased in a lot of sci-fi movies, but never actually happens. So I
Hmm.
like that. And I also loved quick shout out to the quick shout out to the makeup department too for keeping the cut on
Yes.
Carmen's head just above her eyebrow. They
Keeping
keep
that
it very,
consistent.
very, very consistent throughout the film. It's excellent makeup work. Well done. They should get acknowledged for that for sure. And I love the scene where Michael Ironside gets sucked into the into the sand, because obviously the bugs are burrowing underneath the
Stand.
the outpost, I guess, right? In that kind of sort of climactic, one of the climactic battles, at least, where he starts shooting, and then they pull him up by his legs, and his legs are gone, and he's just like, what does he say? He's like, you know what to do.
He
Shoot me,
says,
Rico.
do it, Rico.
Do it, Rico. And
Yeah.
Rico just shoots him right in the heart.
Yeah.
I
Not
love
in the
that scene.
head. I feel like
No,
that would have been more merciful if he just shot him in the head. The heart, like, you still gotta, like, a couple
couple
breaths.
pumps.
Yeah, a couple.
They must have run
I
out of
feel like you
budget.
gotta just, like, go right into the head for that one. I don't
Well,
know.
I think
Just
that's
me.
interesting too, because like in the future, there's a little bit of a foreshadow as well when Rico goes to register for the infantry,
Mhm.
where the guy shakes his hand and he's got a big metal prosthetic hand, and then he wheels around in his chair, and he's got and his legs are gone. Very,
Yeah.
very those are exactly the same injuries that Michael Ironside has before he dies. And so some foreshadowing there for sure, but also as well, like, interesting that they have the ability to build spaceships, and they build metal prosthetic hands, but not legs. So I don't know if that's supposed to mean anything, but it's just, now I've noticed it. I can't unnotice it. So
Can't unnotice it, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So favorite scenes for yourself? Did you want to talk about your favorite death scene?
Oh gosh, I didn't prepare a favorite death scene. I think that they're
But
all
you
just
have you
again,
have
like,
one though. You have one. You told me what it was.
oh yeah, of course. Like
Brain
the
suck.
brain suck. The brain suck is absolutely my favorite death scene because like just his head just deflating is so cool, and like it's such an awesome practical effect. I don't know how they did it, but I love that they did it. And just the look of horror on Carmen's face is just like just perfection. Because clearly, I mean, if you were in that position as well, I'm sure you too would have that look of just abject horror and terror on your face. So I think that's my favorite death. I love the big bombastic dramatic outpost in Clendathi, like the big battle scenes where like everything's just carnage and chaos, because it also just kind of shows like how underprepared they were mentally and emotionally. They were kind of drilled with this idea of like, oh, it's the bugs, kill them all, it's fine. But when they get faced with the reality of it, it's significantly scarier and it's significantly more real. And those bugs are freaking hard to kill, is the thing too. It's like that is difficult. And I do also think it's kind of interesting that you know the humans were really initially like patrolling Marines on the bug planets, and that's kind of what initiated all of this. Is they kind of like to blame it on the bugs, but there's also allusions to the humans kind of treaded on their ground and like started this first, right? Which again, kind of is that mirror with the war on terror in Afghanistan at a later date, how that kind of reflected on it well.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think the practical effects in this movie are so fantastic. CG bugs are a thing, but they kind of have to be for certain parts. I
It's really
do
well
appreciate
meshed
that they
together.
did.
Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. Like, I will say, I said this off the top. Like, the 4K kind of reveals some of the special effects.
Mm,
Um, some of the space scenes, like inside the cockpit of, or on the bridge of the
hmm.
battle stations and that sort of stuff, you can, like, it doesn't look, it looks a bit kind of like Sci-Fi Channel, Space Channel type
Mm,
of thing.
hmm.
But having said that, there are so many good practical effects as far as like blood work
Yeah.
and
Just
severed
gruesome
limbs
gore.
and stuff like that, that it's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. But also as well, like, that most of the CGI does still hold up, like all the swarms of bugs and stuff. It looks pretty good still.
Mhm.
And it's funny too, because one of the things about this film was that the reason it didn't do that well at the box office is, one, it was supposed to be released in July, but of that year, but there was so much other competition from other studios and other films that it got pushed to November. So it didn't do so well in November, obviously, because this is designed to be a big summer tentpole action sci-fi flick. But
Mhm.
also as well, they said that they should have cut it down to PG-13, which I don't agree with, because I don't think you would have this legacy cult movie that has sort of stood the test of time if you cut this down to a PG-13.
Yeah.
I think one of the things of why it's so revered is, when it came out, was because kids like us at the time saw it and we were like, "Oh, like, so violent, like,
Yeah.
like," and there's so many things like when like we mentioned this before, in a previous recording, which we need to say, was there's that scene where they put the cow in the thing for the bug, and the bug eats the cow and it's censored. And then it cuts to like the news report of like the Mormon outpost that is being massacred by these bugs. And it just completely shows them all like just destroyed, bloodied and like killed and whatever, but that's not censored. Right. So it's obviously some social commentary in there, and like on, if it bleeds, it leads, like the news cycle and
do you want to know more?
Do you want to know more? And sort of the indoctrination and people of the youth of today into like, the military of tomorrow. So really cool stuff. I did miss a couple things, so I'm just going to rattle them off here, just because I feel bad if I didn't mention them.
Well,
We
before you
mentioned
do,
all the,
I'm gonna do a quick note about like the 13, like the teenager aspect of it as well, and like the box office too. Is there's the New York Times did a piece where they gave
yes. This is
1,000 13
important.
and
This is important.
14-year-old boys tickets to Bean, which happened to come out around the same time. But the New York Times gave 1,000 of these teenagers tickets to another movie to see if they could sneak into Starship Troopers, because people were doing that a lot at the time of sneaking into multiplexes, because who didn't? It was an option. So after that,
Well,
they've
that's the
had
only
to
way
kind
you
of like
could see the
push that.
movie.
Because the only way you could see it is if you snuck in.
Like,
Exactly.
and you would have to buy something to go and see. Like I
Exactly.
remember,
You'd have to buy something to go see something else.
Last Boy Scout was another one where I
Yeah.
never did this, but my buddies did that, and they bought tickets to like Star Trek or something and snuck into Last Boy
Yeah.
Scout. Yeah.
But if you think of like all the box office dollars that they could have had if those were genuine ticket sales, like it could have been 50 if it was a PG-13 film. I still don't think it would have been as successful. And then one of the other points with that as well is that the Washington Post kind of put out this really like harsh kind of review for what they saw as like a glorification of Nazi symbolism and totalitarian regimes. But so after that came out, it was after the opening weekend, and the numbers went from like a 22 million opening weekend to like a 50% drop right after that. So I think like we kind of touched on before, because there was this great misunderstanding of the film, not understanding it as a satire, and having those, again, do you want to know more, kind of tying back to when there was those newsreel footage before movies back in World War I and World War II, when they would have that newsreel footage to kind of like get people to want to join up and to enlist. So it's interesting that it was such this great satire that like nobody really saw it as a satire at the time. They just saw it as either a big explosion bug movie, or they saw it as something that like, oh, this is embracing that type of regime, and like that's really, really bad.
I think I think it's that internationally, I think, as you can see, like I think international box office and international audiences kind of got it, because it was more of a
Yeah,
critique on the American military, obviously,
for sure.
than anyone else.
Yeah,
And I think that American audiences, when you have media reviews and movie reviews coming out, criticizing that and bringing that to attention, I don't think it computes with American audiences. It's just not. It's
right.
just not for. It's just not for them. Now, you could argue and say, well, look, we just had the Gulf War in the U.S. and it's not something that we wanted. We're not interested in this sort of satirical commentary in an action film, and so therefore it was considered bad and nobody went to see it.
Hmm.
So I do feel like, again, I feel like this movie would be weirder if it was PG-13.
I
I think
agree.
it's
Yeah.
because if it's so violent, it's so again, if it's PG-13, you can have one use of the word fuck in it,
Hmm.
which can't be like a verb. What is it? Can't be a verb.
Hmm.
It's something weird like that, right? So you
Yeah.
can only have one instance of it. No nudity, right? No violence, no blood, no graphic violence. So if you take all that stuff out,
You take away the whole movie.
like maybe you put in like the censored stuff, but I don't think that's not what the movie is about. The movie is the fact that it is uncensored, right? And
Yeah.
again, going back to some of the deleted scenes, it's like you could tell that they were going for something that was like even more risky, when they first started, or risque, I guess, risque.
Even more
When they're first,
European.
yeah, yeah, just a bit more, a bit more European.
European, yeah.
Um, be, more people seeing more other people's spaceships, I guess. But like, I mean, the ultimate idea of making this sort of this again, like if you watch this movie and go and watch RoboCop, and
Mhm.
RoboCop 2, to a certain extent, like it is a commentary on like those movies are a commentary on commercialism in the US
Yeah.
and stuff. And again, probably things that people didn't notice when they first watched the film. So very interesting. But other things, quickly, things I just wanted to mention. We went through the kind of the awesome cast that's part of this movie. I forgot to mention is that Watkins from Rico's Roughnecks is actually actor Seth Gilliam, who went on to star in very, very well-received roles in The Wire and The Walking Dead. So I skipped over him by accident. So just wanted to draw some attention to him. He's a fantastic actor, and it's cool. Again, I don't need to know. I didn't know if he was here. And you know what? We'll just throw up these before we go. These are just some lobby cards because I forgot to do this earlier. But of course, these are some of the original lobby cards that were used for the promotion of the film. Of course, Casper Van Dien and Dina Meyer there, which is interesting that they're on the same lobby card. Because again, like we discussed, we kind of feel like these guys are the driving force behind the movie, as opposed to Carmen and Neil Patrick Harris. Of course, we've got Casper Van Dien with the giant bug. I don't know, a beetle bug, I guess. I can't remember what they're all called, but behind him. And this is what reminded me of this, is because you've got Seth Gilliam there on the left, Casper Van Dien in the middle, and of course Jake Busey on the right, who again is a pretty good character as well, which is kind of cool. And then of course the man himself, Paul Verhoeven. Look at this guy, just disheveled hair, glasses, looking like he's getting some stuff done, and that is creating sci-fi movies in the 80s and the 90s. So, but really cool script, and a really cool sort of flick that they made in 96 and then released in 97. I should say one other interesting fact that we found out was that the actress who falls, so when there's that sequence where they're doing live rounds in the boot camp, so the actress that falls and she accidentally shoots the other soldier in the head, those guys actually went on to get married after the film wrapped. So they fell in love, they got married, but on film, she shoots him in the head and kills him. And that's what results in her leaving the service. The other guy's dead, and Rico gets his 10 lashes in the public square. So just thought that was an interesting fact. And last but not least, I did find this quote. I just lost it, but during that story you were telling Kelly about Verhoeven being critical of the actors in the shower scene, making nudity such a big deal. The actual quote that Dina Meyer said to him was, "Well, why don't you drop your pants, hotshot?" And that's why Verhoeven did. So, hey, I mean, what can you do? Hey, a dare's a dare, I guess, right? So we're not recommending you do that on any movie sets, okay? Just for the record, we're just saying, look, it happened, and hey, Dina Meyer's awesome. And that's all I got for Starship Troopers. You got anything else to add, Kels?
I like to think that Death from Above 1979 is named after this movie. I don't think they are, but I like to think that they are, because they have the Death from Above tattoos. So that's all I have to say about that.
The end.
The end.
Hey, we made it. We were really nervous we wouldn't be able to get through this fourth time, but hey, we did. That's fantastic. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Of course, it's been another edition of 90s Night. If you want to check out our other episodes of Tremors, Arachnophobia, Devil's Advocate, Troll 2, and American Psycho, you can do so on our YouTube channel. Hopefully one plays for you after you watch this episode. And please remember to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell to get notifications on our future videos. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another edition of 90s Night, and we'll put a poll up online and figure out kind of what we're going to do. Of course, Kels, that does it for your requirements. I don't know how many Buenos Aires bug bites you've had tonight, but I know it's been a couple, so we'll definitely let you go on vacation after this. But thanks for everything that you do for the show and all that stuff as well. And of course, it wouldn't be a 90s Night if we didn't play the trailer again, just to send off the episode. And anything to add, Kels? I think we're good, right? I think that's all we got.
Hoorah.
What am I forgetting? Nothing, right?
Nothing.
Get out of here. Can I go now?
Yeah. Keep your eye on things. There we go.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in again to another edition of 90s Night. I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro. Of course, my esteemed co-host is Kels McNells, broadcasting from McNells Manor, right? And here's another look at Starship Troopers. Here's the trailer, and we'll see you again next time.
In every age, There is a cause worth fighting for. But in the future, the greatest threat to our survival will not be man at all.
Hey, kid, what's going on? War! We're going to war!
Now the youth of tomorrow must travel across the stars to defend our world.
We are a generation commanded by fate to defend humankind.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
We are going in with first wave. You smash the entire area. You kill anything that has more than 2 legs. You get me? We get you, sir!
But they will face an enemy more devastating than any ever imagined.
Here it comes!
Incoming!
Mayday, mayday, this is Roughnecks 2-0.
We're under attack, sir. We need retrieval now.
Someone made a damn mistake.
The bugs laid a trap for us, didn't they?
TriStar Pictures takes you to the front lines of the next frontier.
Kill them all!
Starship Troopers.